One of the reasons why we grow up very curious about sex, because I grew up in the village and I was in a very strict Pentecostal church. As a matter of fact, you wouldn't stand with a lady for more than 2 minutes because you would feel uncomfortable. You wouldn't have a lady friend in church because it would appear as if you are crossing a line. So we grew up with very unhealthy understanding of sexuality. We grew up with a very backward view, because now the more you constrain someone and the more you hold them hostage such that they should not say anything or ask anything about sex, what you are doing is that you are preparing this person for an explosion when they will finally find a place where they are far from you and they will want to discover why is it that this subject was so suppressed and such a taboo. And so we prepare them actually for failure. We prepare young people for failure. We should discuss these things at the dinner tables at home with our daughters and our sons, and we should discuss them in our youth churches and in our youth conventions and talk about these things openly, demystify it, and it brings a lot of freedom. Now, I carried out an appraisal of the Kenyan church teaching on human sexuality. And as a matter of fact, this was my theological master's degree thesis. And I was doing a study and investigating what the church has been doing as far as preparing congregants, especially young people, to face the sexual realities of the world we live in and to be informed in terms of when they make sexual decisions. I was trying to investigate the role of the church and what the church has done or what the church is not doing to prepare or to get people ready, believers actually ready to face some of the questions that they will have to face as far as sexuality is concerned. And I realized that actually there are some people who have already done some work in the same field. People like I found a study by but before that, recently, an article published by the Asian Journal of Educational and Social Sciences, an author by the name Mokaya, observes that Kenyan churches are deliberately refusing to accept the sexual realities of the Kenyan society. And there's another statement here by an organization called Guttmacher Institute, New York. They conducted a sexuality education study in Kenya in 2015 in Nairobi, Mombasa, and Homa Bay. And they published their findings in a fact sheet in 2017. And the findings were published in a fact sheet entitled Sexuality Education in Kenya. And what they were saying is that they collected data in 78 schools from teachers, principals, and students in Forms 2 and 3, as well as from other key informants. And it was observed that 26% of students, mostly aged 15 to 17, had already had sexual intercourse. And this shows that the young people are engaging in sexual activities. And the church needs to do something about it. To either, listen to now the research that I wanted to refer to at the beginning. And this is by Christine Kahingi in her PhD thesis, she was investigating the influence of sources of sexual information and personal characteristics on secondary school students' sexual behavior in Thika West Sub-County, Kenya. And what does she observe? She observes that sexual pressure on today's youth is different from that faced by previous generations. And Kahingi investigated the role of religious institutions in the sex problem facing the society, and she made the following observations in her research. Now, this is important because and I agree with her, she says, studies show that a big percentage of adolescents who are affiliated to a religious faith are less likely to become as promiscuous as those without any religious affiliation. What she's saying is that she found out that the young people who have some religious affiliation of some sort ended up becoming less promiscuous, or they were a bit more disciplined when it came to sexual activity. And she says they are better than those without any religious affiliation. So church-going youth, even though they struggle with the same problem, but she observes that they're a little bit better than those without any religious affiliation. For example, a study on adolescents aged 11 to 25 years showed that respondents who were not sexually active scored significantly higher than those who were sexually active on the importance of religion in their lives. Right? They also reported more connections with friends whom they considered to be religious or spiritual than those reported by respondents who were sexually active. It shows that the young people who are less sexually active, they even made more meaningful relationships, friendships, connections than those who are, sexually active. And this is a study carried out in her PhD project. Now listen. Another study of adolescents aged 12 to 17 years by a national campaign to prevent teen pregnancy, but this is a bit old, it's 2001, found that 26% of adolescents who said they attended religious services a few times a year still identified moral values and religious beliefs as a factor that most affected their decisions about whether to have sex or not. And so you see, in spite of conservative nature of denominations over sex education, it is worth also noting that some studies show that adolescents not associated with a church begin to have sex earlier than others. It is important to know, however, that there is less sexuality information from the religious institutions for those adolescents who may not be looking for it from other sources. Now, this is very important because it tells us that the church actually helps in terms of constraining young people from sexual promiscuity. What it says is that, yes, there's already something going on. The church is doing something, but the church is also silent on some very key aspects of the same conversation, because it's we are very silent. We let our young people discover sex from the media, from social media, and from other sources, and the television and movies and all such kind of things, or from their peers who may not necessarily be holding similar convictions as the other. Now, and that's dangerous because it means that there will be great exposure The media has misrepresented human sexuality from as long as I can remember, and it's become a commodity that can be sold and merely used for pleasure or to gain attention. That's why you're seeing adverts. We see them everywhere on social media and on other places. And there's a lot of abuse of the body of a man, the body of a woman. There's a lot of misinformation and wrong placement of this great gift that God has given us. And it's likely that every young person will struggle at some point when it comes to dealing with questions regarding their sexuality. And this informs the reason why I actually chose this subject as my project for my master's thesis, where I was trying to conducting an appraisal. I did a case study of 3 churches in Nairobi, 3 big churches in the city, and it came out clearly that yes, there's a lot that needs to be done. The church needs to get more proactive in telling the world and the young people about things like the right definition of sex and the right understanding about it, so that young people do not discover it in their secrecy. We need to open this conversation and demystify what sex is. And one of the reasons why we grew up very curious about sex, because I grew up in the village and I was in a very strict Pentecostal church. As a matter of fact, you wouldn't stand with a lady for more than 2 minutes because you would feel uncomfortable. You wouldn't have a lady friend in church because it would appear as if you are crossing a line. So we grew up with very unhealthy understanding of sexuality. We grew up with a very backward view, because now the more you constrain someone and the more you hold them hostage such that they should not say anything or ask anything about sex, what you are doing is that you are preparing this person for an explosion when they will finally find a place where they are far from you, and they will want to discover why is it that this subject was so suppressed and such a taboo. And so we prepare them actually for failure. We prepare young people for failure. We should discuss these things at the dinner tables at home with our daughters and our sons, and we should discuss them in our youth churches and in our youth conventions and talk about these things openly, demystify it, and it brings a lot of freedom. So the findings revealed that the most prevalent perspectives, okay, don't worry about it. Of course, it was found out, from my study, I found out that the media has become a primary influential force in shaping how we perceive human sexuality, both negatively and positively. And most of the respondents felt that the media had influenced them. Okay. Mainstream media, magazines, movies, music, and the internet, they provide increasingly changing portrayals of sexuality. In some instances, the media had shaped the perspective of human sexuality negatively and has been used as an instrument to normalize unhealthy and unbiblical sexual behaviors. The reason why most of us struggle is because of the exposure we are receiving each day in our timelines and all that. And what we are being told and challenged as a people of God is to rethink the whole conversation and begin and determine that we shall be a leading voice in the lives of young people when it comes to talking about sex. We will not let them discover it on their own in the media and on pornographic websites and on the social media. We should endeavor to be the first teacher when it comes to this. Now listen. This is an ongoing conversation, and the findings, I've got a lot of them. Of course, I had several questions which I was asking from my respondents, and I conducted a very thorough research on this, and I'm going to be sharing this.